The following is a summary of the Sicha of Shabbos Parshas Miketz, Tov Shin Nun Beis. One of the novelties of Hanukkah in relation to all the other festivals is that on the other Yomim Tovim, there is an obligation to have a meal, a mishta and a simcha with eating and drinking, whereas principally on Hanukkah, we celebrate with Hallel and Hoidah, with giving thanks to Hashem for the miracles and the lighting of candles. The reason is because the Nitzochon, the victory of the festival of Hanukkah, is connected with Ruchnius, with the spiritual. Unlike the miracle of Purim, in which the Gezerah, the decree of Purim was principally on the Jewish body, Hanukkah, the decree was principally on the Jewish soul. And that's why we celebrate with kindling lights, as the Pasuk says, Neir mitzvah v'Torah oir, that the content of the candle is the mitzvah and the content of Torah is light. And consequently, since principally the battle of the Greeks was against the spiritual nature of the Jews, therefore we celebrate with light. However, we say that not only is this celebration spiritual versus physical, but even in relation to the spirituality of the other festivals, there is a novelty in Hanukkah. By way of introduction, even the physical, material engagement of a Jew during the entire year is also of a spiritual nature, as we see by their eating and drinking, bread and water. Their bread and water is also compared to Torah. And when a Jew eats bread and drinks water, it's noticeable in them that they refer to Torah. Certainly on Shabbos and Yom Tov, when the eating is a mitzvah. And similarly, when it comes to the other Yomim Tovim, which is connected with the saving of the body of the Jew, that is connected also with Ruchnius, with the spirituality of the Jew. And therefore, even in the eating and drinking on the Yom Tov, what is emphasized is the spiritual aspect of it. And the truth is that the same is true the other way around, that in the spiritual celebration of Hanukkah is also emphasized their physical redemption as well. And therefore, we must say that in fact the novelty of Hanukkah over the other Yomim Tovim is over the spirituality of the other Yomim Tovim as well. We'll be able to understand this by explaining the spiritual nature of the physical celebration of the other Yomim Tovim. In general, we celebrate with lechem, bread, mayim, water, yayin, wine, and shemen and oil. Now we know that these four items correspond to different elements of Torah. Lechem and mayim, bread and water, correspond to nigla, the revealed aspect of the Torah. Yayin refers to rozin, the secrets of the Torah. And shemen refers to rozin, de rozin, the secrets of the secrets. Bread and water are absolutely necessary for the body, whereas wine and oil is only to add chayas, simcha through wine, and tainug and pleasure through oil. The learning of nigla of the Torah is absolutely necessary in order to fulfill the mitzvahs, leida hamaisa ashayasun, to know the halacha of the deed. Nistar, the hidden aspect of the Torah, increases chayas, life, and tainug and pleasure in the performance of mitzvahs by infusing them with ahavas Hashem and yiras Hashem, the love and fear of Hashem. In Nistar itself, there is a difference between wine and oil. Wine is used at certain times on Shabbos and Yom Tov, and we drink it as a beverage by itself, whereas oil is not drunk by itself, but rather it's mixed with other foods. The dogma in Nister, in the Nister of Torah, Yayin is rosin of Torah. Yayin refers to the secrets of the Torah, which is and can be revealed, whereas shemen, oil of the Torah, is rosin de rosin. It's the secrets of the secrets, even higher than any form of revelation. And in this we see the novelty of Hanukkah, which is connected with oil. And that's why, since Hanukkah is celebrated with oil, it's not celebrated with mishta v'simcha, with eating and drinking like on other Yom Tovim, not with a su'uda of lechem, mayim, and yayin. Rather, there's a specific celebration just with oil. Now, we need to explain what is the connection of Hanukkah specifically with oil. Seemingly, Hanukkah is a Yom Tov Midrabanan. It's only a rabbinic festival. It took place in a time when the Jewish people were on a low. And if that's the case, how come it's connected with shemen, with oil, which is the highest secret of the Torah? The answer is that in the order of revelation of the Torah, as the darkness gets greater, so too is there greater revelation in Torah. Torah is light and it illuminates. And in the situation of the greatest descent, that's where you need the greatest illumination of the Torah, shemen, the rosin, the secrets of the Torah. The explanation to that is as follows. The Greeks represent chokhmah de klipa, wisdom but of klipa, chokhmas chitzonius, wisdom but not of Torah. And it's a form of wisdom which actually denies the prophecy of the Torah. That's what it means, timu kol hashmanim, that the Greeks defiled the divine origin and source of the Torah. Now, how come they had the ability to do that? One may say that it was because of a certain yenika, a nourishment that the klipa of Yavan received from the Torah itself, and it was abused. We find that there is actually an advantage in the Greek language over other languages. In the pasuk Yaft Elokim liyefes v'yishkein be'ahal Shem, it says that the Yafyusoi shel Yefes, the beauty of Yefes, which is Greece, Yehei ba'al Shem, will be in the tense of Shem, in the sense that the Torah was translated into Greek in the days of Talmai HaMelech. Nevertheless, Chazal tell us that that day was a very difficult day for the Yidden, like the day on which the golden calf was offered. What is the explanation in that? The answer is that as far as drawing down Torah to the world is concerned and explaining Torah in 70 languages, that itself is something which is good. However, when it was written by Talmai HaMelech or for Talmai HaMelech, and it wasn't on the instruction of Hashem, there was a great worry that this should be misused and it would be used for something which is not holy, and that's why it was difficult as the day that the golden calf was offered. Therefore, as a result of the translation of the Torah into Greek by Talmai HaMelech, which was not a tzivui, a command of Hashem, that resulted in the gezerah, in the decree of the Greeks, and it resulted in their efforts to disconnect the Torah from its divine source. In other words, the Greeks agreed that there was in Torah a chokhmah nifla, a tremendous wisdom. However, the translation into Greek allowed for that wisdom to be recognized. However, it gave room for its divine source to be denied. And that's the meaning of Timu Kol Hashmanim, that they defiled and denied the divine source of the Torah. That's why the miracle of Hanukkah had to be with pure oil, because since they wanted to defile the Kedusha, the holiness of the Torah, the miracle of Hanukkah had to be emphasizing the Kedusha of the Torah, specifically through pure oil with the signet of the high priest, which is a very great level in oil itself, a level which even the Greeks can't defile or touch, and a level which caused a transcendent lighting of 8 days. This concept is emphasized in the Nister element of Torah, because when one learns Nigla of Torah, the matters one is learning are of the world, and one may, in the Torah which relates to the world, recognize the tremendous wisdom of the Torah. However, one may come to forget that the Torah belongs to Hashem. The Eitzah is that Nigla needs to be learned together with Nistar, with a knowledge of Elokus, so much so that the Nistar permeates the Nigla with Elokus, with godliness. And that is the advantage of oil. Oil is a substance which carries right through every other substance. And therefore, when the Nigla is mixed with the Nistar, the shemen, the oil of the Nistar, illuminates right through the Torah and shines the mo'ir of the Torah, the luminary of the Torah, through into the Nigla. That results in illuminating not only the 4 cubits of a Jew, but also extends to outside until it in fact removes the feet of the Talmudians being the nation from Talmud, which is the same letters as the word Moiredes or Mordim, those who rebel against Hashem, and Kalia from the word Klois HaNefesh. It can transform those who rebel against Hashem, that they are transformed to cleave to Hashem. The ultimate revelation of that took place on Yud Tes Kislev, the time when there was the principle Hafatzas Hamayanas Chutza, dissemination of the teachings of Chassidus. In other words, even after the miracle of Hanukkah and the annulment of the decree of the Greeks through the miracle of the oil, the engagement of Jews in Limud HaTorah was still principally in Nigla, and Chochmas HaKabbalah was hidden. It was only in the generation of the Arizal where he instructed that a mitzvah to reveal this wisdom, and thereafter, in the times of the Baal Shem Tov and the Rabbeim, was there the full revelation of Pnimius HaTorah. So Hanukkah emphasizes the effect of the oil in Nigla. The chidush, the novelty of Yud Tes Kislev, is that the learning of Nister, Rozin de Rozin, the secrets of the Torah, became a principle in itself, not just the oil mixing with the Nister, mixing with the Nigla, but it became recognizable in the Nigla that the principle is the oil itself. That became the principal food. And the reason why it was revealed in latter generations is because of the tremendous darkness of the generations. In fact, the more there are the prevalence of Chachmas Chitzonis, of the outer wisdoms, that necessitated a greater feed of Shemen of Pnimius HaTorah. The darker it got, the greater the revelation of Chassidus there needed to be. So, for example, in the days of the Rebbe Rashab, when the Haskalah movement reared its head in a very big way, that's when the Rebbe Rashab founded the Yeshiva Tomchei Tmimim, and further branches through the Frierdiker Rebbe, and even further, Chassidus was translated into many different languages, bringing the Mayan, the wellspring itself, into the furthest chutzah. One step further and deeper, the revelation of the secrets of the Torah is not only because of the prevalence of darkness, but also, and more importantly, because we are coming to the time of Mashiach. Mashiach himself is the one who is Mashuach b'Shem and anointed with oil, because then will be the principal learning of the secrets of the Torah, and we are now having a foretaste of the Torah of Mashiach. And in fact, the prevalence of darkness in the world is itself a sign that we're just holding now by Mashiach, because the Le'umasa, the forces of unholiness, are having their final fight to try and prevent the coming of Mashiach. And Mashiach will have to wage a war against that, and he will prevail and be victorious. That is emphasized in Hanukkah, 8 days of Hanukkah connected with the 8 strings of the harp of Mashiach and the 8 princes of men, of which Mashiach is one of them. And connected with Yud Tes Kislev, where there's Hafotzas Amayonos Chutza, which brings Mashiach, as the Baal Shem Tov said, and that is in an ever-increasing way through the yeshiva of Tomchei Tmimim, and especially in our generation, when we've finished everything that we need to do, and all we need to do now is to open up our eyes to the reality of Geula. All of this is connected also with Parshas Miketz. Miketz is connected with the Ketz Hayomim, the end of days, the Sof HaGolos, and the Ketz Hayomim, the beginning of Geula, which is connected with the 2 reasons of the Gilui, the revelation of Chasidus. And this is connected also with the continuation of the parashiyos of Vayeshev, Vayigash, and Vayechi. That's the descent of Yaakov into Mitzrayim. Vayeshev, Yaakov desired to dwell in tranquility. He really wanted to have that tranquility of the days of Mashiach. He wanted the Miketz, the end of days. And Vayigash, he wanted to draw near Yehuda to Yosef, the Geula to Tfilah, and Vayechi, he wanted to have the Chayim Nitzchim, the everlasting life of the Geula. Yaakov, the third of the Avos, is connected with the third Beis Hamikdash. And principally, Yaakov is brought down into the world through Yosef, meaning that there's a revelation of Torah, Yaakov, in Mitzrayim through Yosef. This explains the words that Yaakov said to Paroi when asked how old he is. Yaakov responded, Yemei Shnei Mugurai Shloshim U'Mi'ah Shana. He's 130 years. Me'at V'roim. They are very few and bad. Hayu Yemei Shnei Chayai V'lo Hisigu Yemei Shnei Chayai V'Oseh B'mei Megureim. He didn't reach the age of his forefathers. This is actually very difficult. First of all, when Paroi asked him how old he was, and he says he was 130 years old, Paroi himself could understand whether that was a great or a small number. And more importantly, he said he was 130 years old. How could he describe that as me'at, as few? Most people only live to 120 years. In fact, the Mefarshim say the reason why Paroi asked how old he was is because he saw a man of a very, very old man in front of him. Most people in that generation didn't live that old, so he asked him how old he was. So how could Yaakov says that he only is 130, and he called it ma'at, very few? One may say the answer is because in reference to the years of his father and grandfather, 175 and 180 years, they were few. However, from Rashi, who says that that they didn't reach the goodness of the years, it implies that these 130 years were ma'at, they were few. So the answer is they were few in quality as opposed to quantity. In other words, even although in quantity they were actually very many, it was great longevity in quantity. However, because of all the difficulties of Yaakov's life, he described them as few. In other words, they didn't have the element of bar bayomim, of all his days being full. In Pnimius, what that means, that since Yaakov, he was ready for the Geula, the entire time that the Geula had not come, literally, he considered his days as few. And Yaakov told Paroi that their dwelling in Egypt was only, in fact, a preparation for Geula, which he was waiting for. What can we learn from all this L'maisa b'poel in our daily lives? In addition to the fact that this is the last generation of Golus and the first generation of Geula, the days which we are in now are auspicious, both because they're in Parshas Miketz, meaning the end of the Geula, and also in Hanukkah, and especially Shabbos Hanukkah. And therefore, the first thing is that we should add every single day in matters that draw nearer the Geula, strengthening our emunah and our yearning for the Geula, so much so that Kol Zman the Geula has not yet arrived, we consider our days as a few. And the main thing is to add in the learning of the oil of Chassidus and spreading it out, strengthening Mivtza Chanukah, the Chanukah campaign, and increasing in Chanukah Geld. All this is emphasized on Shabbos Chanukah, which is also Rosh Chodesh. The concept of Kalya Regula de Talmudoi, of finishing the feet of those who rebel against Hashem, is emphasized on Shabbos, when we have the concept of Rishus HaRabim, the public domain, and the halachas of Shabbos connected with that. And then there's the Vayechulu, there's the Kiloyin and Klois HaNefesh of those who rebel against Hashem, meaning that those who rebel against Hashem are finished and they are transformed. And certainly when Rosh Chodesh is 2 days, we have a double chidush, a double renewal in that effort. The Yehi Rotzain that Hashem himself should give his child Chanukah Geld, which means that Hashem should give us the Geula, Hashem should give us the third Beis Hamikdash, and then as we come into the month of Teves, the 10th of Teves will be transformed into a Yom Tov. We will not have to fast then. Yehavchu Yomim Elu, and they will be for Sasan and Simcha and Moyadim Tovim.